went to Costa Rica for 2 weeks, came back, and there were strangers living in my house with a deed, furniture, and a welcome mat that said, "Bless this mess." Turns out my HOA president, a woman who once fined me for aggressive lawn gnomes, sold my home behind my back legally, or so she thought. This isn't just a bad HOA story. This is organized crime with landscaping rules and a pearl necklace. I stepped off the plane with a sunburn, a suitcase full of sandy laundry, and a smug sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. 14 days in Costa Rica, no laptops, no HO emails, no passive-aggressive flyers taped to my front door, just fresh ceviche, monkeys screaming in the jungle, and a much-needed digital detox from the slow burn hell that was Clearbrook Glen. I was ready to come home, crash in my bed, and pretend my suburban neighborhood wasn't being run like a Cold War surveillance state by a woman with a clipboard addiction. The Uber driver made the last turn into my cul-de-sac, and I immediately noticed something was off. First, there was a police cruiser idling in my driveway, its lights off but engine running. Second, there was a white Honda Odyssey parked behind it, definitely not mine. But what really got my attention was the trio standing on my front porch, a man, a woman, and 2 kids playing on the steps like it was their house. I leaned forward. My porch swing had been replaced, so had the potted plants. Even the freaking doormat was different. As we pulled up, one of the officers stepped forward and placed a hand on his belt like I'd just shown up with a crowbar. I grabbed my bag and walked up slowly, trying not to look like a home invader, even though this was my home. "Excuse me," I said. "This is my house. What's going on?" The woman on the porch immediately froze, holding out a key like it was proof of ownership. The man looked confused but not alarmed. The officer turned to me. "Sir, the homeowners here called about a potential intruder. We'll need to see some ID." I fumbled for my passport, still in the front pocket of my backpack. "I've lived here for 6 years. I've been in Costa Rica for the last 2 weeks. This is my house." The kids peeked out from behind their dad, and the mom stepped slightly in front of them as if I was the threat. The cop squinted at my ID like it might spontaneously tell the truth. "These residents provided legal documents showing they purchased the home 2 weeks ago. It's all on file." I blinked. "Purchased? My house wasn't for sale. I never listed it. There must be a mistake." I stepped forward, trying to look past them through the window. My heart stopped. Everything inside was different. Furniture, paint, boxes still sealed with moving tape. My stuff was gone. The officer raised a hand. "Sir, I need you to take a step back." His voice was calm, but the tension in his posture wasn't. "If you have documentation proving ownership, you'll need to go through the proper channels." The other officer, a woman with the haircut that screams, "Follows procedure," looked down at a folder in her hand. I could see my address printed in bold letters. My name wasn't there. I took a breath and tried not to scream. I had left everything perfectly in place. Mortgage on autopay. Lawn care hired. Mail held at the post office. The only thing remotely abnormal had been a passive-aggressive warning email from Karen Mallory, our beloved HOA president, reminding me that mailbox flag discoloration may reflect poorly on neighborhood values. But standing there, watching another man wave hello to a neighbor from my porch, I realized something deeply disturbing. This wasn't just a paperwork mix-up. This wasn't a glitch in the system. This was surgical, planned, precise, like someone had been waiting for me to leave. The man on my porch had my welcome mat, my mailbox, and apparently my house too. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time to step away from the property." The officer's tone wasn't angry, just exhausted, like he'd rather be anywhere else than breaking up a suburban turf war at 4 p.m. on a Monday. I backed off, still clutching my passport like it was a shield. "This is my house," I said, softer this time. "I have proof, my taxes, my mortgage. My mail is still being held at the post office for this address." The officer nodded like he'd heard it all before. "I understand, but right now they have a deed and a bill of sale. You don't." The woman on the porch, her name was apparently Bethany, looked sincerely sympathetic. "We're not trying to cause a problem. We bought this place in good faith." The agent said the owner had walked away and the HOA was handling the sale. Her husband chimed in. "Honestly, we thought it was a steal. The listing was up for 3 days. The realtor said it was an expected lien sale or something like that." I blinked. Lien sale? I hadn't missed a single HOA payment. I didn't even know they could sell a house over unpaid grass fines. Was that even legal? The female officer handed me a business card and suggested I find legal counsel. If there's been a mistake, you'll need to contact the HOA and the county recorder's office, but as of now, we can't let you into the premises. I nodded slowly, the kind of nod people do right before their brain melts. I looked at my house one last time. My shutters were painted a different color. Even the porch light had been replaced. It felt like walking into someone else's dream or nightmare. I walked back to the curb like a man in a trance, flagged down the same Uber that hadn't even left yet, and asked him to take me to the nearest hotel. That night, I sat in a dingy motel room that smelled like sadness and microwave lasagna, trying to piece together the last 2 weeks like a crime scene. My mortgage was auto-drafted. My HOA fees were paid through a secure portal that reminded me monthly to update my password. Nothing had bounced. I logged into my online banking. Everything checked out. No missed payments, no delinquency notices. So how the hell did someone claim my property was abandoned? I opened my HOA app, which, fun fact, Karen had proudly launched last year and called Clearbrook Command. Of course she did. I dug through my messages and saw the last one she sent me before I left. Please address mailbox compliance by March 5th, or HOA may take administrative action. Karen's idea of administrative action usually involved notes written in Comic Sans and threats to fine you $75.00 per blade of grass, so I hadn't exactly prioritized it, but now that phrasing hit different. I scrolled deeper and found nothing else unusual, just reminders about trash can hours and a new community rule banning inflatable decor over 4 feet. I could practically hear Karen's voice saying, "This is a neighborhood, not a carnival." Still, I needed help, so I called the only person who'd ever managed to beat the HOA at their own game, Ben Feldman, a local attorney who'd once gotten a $500 0 cents trash can violation thrown out on a technicality involving city waste collection zones. Ben picked up after the second ring and listened without interrupting as I explained everything. When I finished, there was a long wait, he said. "You're telling me the HOA sold your house while you were gone for 2 weeks without any court order?" "Not just sold it," I said. "Replace my life with a doormat that says live, laugh, lake life." "Jesus," he muttered. "All right, come in tomorrow. Bring everything. HOA emails, banking records, travel docs. And don't throw out that motel receipt. It might actually help." I stared at the ceiling. My eyes burned. My fingers were shaking. And for the first time it hit me, Karen hadn't just crossed a line. She had bulldozed it, paved over it, and written her name in the wet cement. Ben wasn't available until Friday, so he referred me to one of his associates, Danielle Monroe, a sharp real estate attorney with the calm energy of someone who never raises her voice because she knows the facts will do the yelling. I met her in a small office above a frozen yogurt shop, clutching a manila folder stuffed with every document I could think of: HOA emails, travel itinerary, mortgage statements, and the sad motel receipt Ben told me not to throw out. Danielle glanced at the stack, then looked at me with the kind of expression people usually reserve for unpaid interns or people who use Comic Sans unironically. "I've handled HOA disputes before," she said, flipping through the papers, "but I've never seen one where they sold the house while the owner was getting sunburned in a hammock." She tapped her keyboard, eyes narrowing. "Let's see what they filed with the county." Less than 5 minutes later, she had it pulled up. The document was titled "Notice of Trustee Sale, filed 2 weeks ago, right when I left for Costa Rica." It claimed the property was abandoned, delinquent, and non-compliant with community bylaws, and cited 6 months of unpaid HOA dues as the basis for action. 6 months. "That's not possible," I said. My HOA fees are on auto pay. I checked the account. I've never missed a payment." Danielle nodded, already digging deeper. "That's what I figured. And here's the kicker. Every notice they claim to have sent you was marked certified mail." She pointed to a list of dates, "which means they needed your signature to prove delivery. Did you sign anything?" I shook my head. "I wasn't even in the country, and my mail was on hold with USPS." She raised an eyebrow. "Then either the post office is moonlighting as a forgery lab, or someone faked these notices." We requested copies of the certified mail receipts. 3 days later, a courier delivered a packet from the county records office. Inside were scans of what were supposedly my signed acknowledgments, except the signature didn't match mine. Not even close. It looked like someone had tried to copy my name from memory after being concussed. Danielle squinted at the scribble. This looks like a toddler's first attempt at cursive after 5 Red Bull. We both stared at it. I felt like I was watching someone forge my identity in slow motion. It got worse. The inspection report included in the sale file stated that the home showed clear signs of long-term abandonment, despite my lawn being mowed weekly by a landscaping service I had on retainer. There were timestamp photos, all taken from weird angles, like someone was trying not to capture the actual mailbox full of held mail or the security camera sign I had near my doorbell. Danielle leaned back, clearly annoyed. This isn't just sloppy, it's calculated. Somebody wanted this property cleared. Fast. She started making calls to the recorder's office, the county assessor, even the real estate agent listed on the sale document. No one had a straight answer. Some claimed they just processed what the HOA submitted. Others gave vague statements about community asset recovery. One guy even said, "Oh yeah, Clearbrook Glen? That HOA's got teeth. We stay out of their business." Danielle rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might reboot. "This wasn't a clerical error," she said flatly. "This was a hit job dressed up as paperwork." She paused, tapping her pen. "You're not the first person this has happened to, are you?" I froze. "What do you mean?" She leaned in. "Let's check the last 3 homes that sold in your neighborhood and see how many of them were abandoned." I stared at her computer screen, heart suddenly pounding. Because if I wasn't the first, then someone out there had made a business out of vanishing people from their own homes. Danielle's theory haunted me all night. I barely slept, and when I did, I dreamt of my house being auctioned off by a woman in a pearl necklace, holding a gavel shaped like a clipboard. By morning, I was back in her office with a large coffee and a silent prayer that I'd wake up in my real bed instead of a discount motel with coin-operated air conditioning. Danielle was already typing furiously when I arrived. "You're not going to like this," she said without looking up. 3 homes sold through expedited HOA liens in the last 18 months, all while the owners were out of town. 2 claimed they never received any notice. 1 didn't find out until he came home to a new family living in his living room. I didn't know whether to feel relieved that I wasn't crazy or horrified that this was a pattern. I pulled out my phone and started flipping through my neighborhood Facebook group. It was mostly photos of dogs, arguments about recycling bins, and people complaining about kids selling lemonade without a vendor's permit. But buried deep in the comments, I found this: posts from angry former homeowners who claimed the HOA had squeezed them out or made life unbearable until they voluntarily relocated. One name kept popping up: Karen Mallory. Karen had been the HOA president since I moved in. Actually, since anyone moved in, 7 consecutive terms, each one as iron-fisted as the last. She treated the HOA like a personal fiefdom, issuing fines like parking tickets and calling emergency board meetings if someone dared hang a non-seasonal wreath. One year, I put up Halloween decorations on October 27th instead of the official seasonal launch date of October 30th. She emailed me a screenshot of the bylaws and highlighted the phrase, "No thematic ornamentation shall be displayed more than 72 hours prior to approved holiday windows." It was like being haunted by a ghost with access to my... Her obsessions weren't limited to holidays. She once left a handwritten note in my mailbox that said, "Your porch light emits a harsh glare inconsistent with the community's lighting harmony." Lighting harmony, as if my LED bulb had committed a war crime. She also held quarterly inspections with a tape measure, a paint swatch book, and a small level, because apparently one neighbor's blinds were aggressively tilted. Karen wasn't just enforcing the rules, she was the rules. I started digging. One of the abandoned homes from Danielle's list belonged to Marcus Ridge, a retired Marine who had left town for 4 months to care for his mother in Arizona. I remembered him. A quiet guy, early 40s, kept his lawn trimmed like a golf course, and once helped a neighbor install a flagpole. His home had been sold while he was gone. I called the number Danielle found in the sale records, and Marcus picked up on the first ring. When I told him what happened to me, there was a long pause. "They got you too," he said finally. "I came home and they'd changed the locks." Karen said I had abandoned my patriotic duties to the neighborhood. She told me that the HOA doesn't pause for personal drama. Said if I cared about the community, I'd have stayed. I stared at the wall, jaw tight. "So what did you do?" He sighed. "Got a lawyer, fought it, lost half my stuff, still fighting. But if you're going after her, I'm in." Karen Mallory wasn't just a micromanager with control issues. She was a chess player, and she'd been sacrificing pawns while moving herself deeper into power for years. HOA fees were her opening move. Liens were her strategy. Forced sales were her checkmate. But she wasn't expecting someone to flip the board. Danielle's office turned into a war room. We weren't just fighting a clerical error anymore. We were tracking a criminal operation wearing khakis and HOA polos. The deeper she dug, the worse it got. The sale documents submitted to the county included a forged affidavit of abandonment with my name printed below a signature that looked like it had been traced by someone using their non-dominant hand during an earthquake. Danielle ordered a forensic signature analysis just to be thorough, but it didn't take an expert to know that squiggly mess wasn't mine. We checked the notary listed on the form. Turns out she'd moved out of state 2 years ago. Then came the bombshell. The real estate agency listed on my sale, Safe Haven Realty, was owned by none other than Paige Mallory, as in Karen Mallory's sister-in-law. We tried to contact Safe Haven Realty through normal channels, emails, phone calls, LinkedIn messages, but everything led to a voicemail inbox that was full and unable to accept new messages. Danielle wasn't fazed. She filed a formal request for digital submission records tied to the PDF sales packet uploaded to the county system. When the files came back, she grinned like a cat about to knock over a priceless vase. His upload IP address was traced directly to a residential network on Rosewood Drive, Karen Mallory's street, not her office, her home. That's it, Danielle said, eyes blazing. This wasn't a mistake. This was a homegrown operation. We compiled everything, fake signatures, invalid notary, sale paperwork routed through Karen's in-law, and digital breadcrumbs leading straight to her living room. Danielle drafted a formal complaint and marched with me to the Riverfield County District Attorney's office like we were delivering a bomb. We expected shock, outrage, maybe a "we'll bring her in before lunch." Instead, we got a receptionist who looked like she hadn't blinked since 1997 and a junior assistant DA who skimmed our report with all the urgency of someone reading a toaster manual. "This seems like a civil matter," he mumbled, "probably best resolved through mediation or a housing court." Danielle's mouth fell open. "They stole his house with forged documents?" The guy shrugged. "Yeah, but it's still technically under the HOA's jurisdiction, right?" I could feel the blood rising to my ears. "So if a cartel wears a cardigan and schedules meetings, it's not a crime?" We left the DA's office in silence, the kind of silence that's louder than yelling. I wanted to punch something, but all I had was a lukewarm cup of coffee and a folder full of proof that no one seemed to care about. Danielle sat beside me in the car, tapping her pen on the dashboard like she was composing a murder ballad. "They're stonewalling because it's too neat," she finally said. "Too internal. No drugs, no violence, no juicy headlines, just paperwork, the most boring kind of crime." She looked at me, "Which means we need to make it louder." I didn't understand what she meant at first, but that night she emailed me a contact. Mara Fields, investigative reporter at Channel 11 Now, local TV's queen of takedowns. Danielle's message was short. She did a piece on a corrupt city planning board last year, blew the lid off the whole thing. "Let's see if HOA Karen survives her." Stared at my inbox, pulse picking up. If the law didn't care, maybe the cameras would. Because if Karen wanted to play silent tyrant behind closed HOA doors, then it was time to put her face on every living room screen in the county. Danielle didn't wait. The same night we got stonewalled by the DA's office, she shot off an email to Mara Fields, the lead investigative reporter at Channel 11 Now. By morning, Mara had replied with 2 words, "Let's talk." 48 hours later, I found myself sitting across from her in a booth at a quiet diner off Highway 6. She wore dark rimmed glasses, no makeup, and the kind of expression that made me feel like I was already part of a story she'd been chasing for weeks. "I've covered corrupt sheriffs, rigged zoning boards, and a city council that used public funds to install hot tubs," she said, stirring her coffee. "But an HOA running a black market real estate scam? That's new." I mean, we gave her everything: documents, forged signatures, IP data, notary records, and the connection between Karen and Safe Haven Realty. Mara's eyes lit up when Danielle mentioned that we had voice memos from neighbors who'd been threatened. "This one guy," I said Karen told him, and I quote, If you can't afford the mulch fee, maybe you don't deserve property ownership. Mara nearly choked on her eggs. We're definitely putting that in. She asked to speak with Marcus Ridge and the two other former homeowners. By the end of the week, she had enough for a full segment, and she wasn't just going to bury it online. She was going prime time. The broadcast aired on a Thursday at 6:30 p.m. sharp. It opened with drone footage of Clearbrook Glen, white fences, trimmed hedges, perfect symmetry, all set to eerie piano music. Then came the interviews, residents describing bogus violations, threats of liens over minor infractions, and Karen's infamous voicemail recordings. One played on loop. This is Karen Mallory from the HOA. If you do not remit the $200 0 cents lawn maintenance fee by Friday, we'll be initiating property reclamation. You've been warned. The way she said reclamation like it was a medieval crusade gave everyone chills. Another resident described Karen inspecting his recycling bin with a flashlight at 11:45 p.m., looking for non-compliant plastics. The report included screenshots from the HOA's internal app, Clearbrook Command, where Karen had posted passive-aggressive reminders that read more like eviction notices in disguise. Mara wrapped the piece with a quote from Danielle. The HOA was designed to maintain neighborhood harmony, not operate as a privately weaponized regime. It ended with a side-by-side comparison of my original deed and the forged one, with big bold letters, forgery suspected, investigation pending. The phones in Clearbrook Glen didn't stop ringing for the next 72 hours. But the real twist came after the camera stopped rolling. While reviewing archived HOA emails, I noticed something odd in the metadata. Danielle pulled up a series of vacation notification forms, standard stuff homeowners submitted to the HOA when leaving town for extended periods. Most people did it for safety, but there was a pattern. Every home targeted in a lien sale had submitted one of these forms within 2 weeks of being abandoned, and that's when it clicked. Karen wasn't guessing, she was tracking. Digging deeper, we found that Karen had access to a spreadsheet labeled Community Watch, Extended Absences. It listed names, addresses, departure and return dates, everything someone would need to time a fraudulent takeover. She hadn't just tripped into these opportunities. She had been planning them down to the day. And the most recent entry on the list, me. Departing March 10, returning March 24. Types timestamped and marked with a green check. It didn't take long after the news aired for things to start unraveling. By Friday morning, a wave of emails hit the Riverfield DA's office. Residents were furious, and not just the ones who'd been directly affected. Some were just tired of being bossed around about their petunias. The HOA board went into panic mode, issuing a statement full of words like misunderstanding, miscommunication, and represented by media, which Mara promptly aired on Sunday night next to a slow zoom of Karen inspecting someone's doormat with a ruler. The pressure was too loud to ignore. By Monday, the Riverfield County Sheriff's Office executed a search warrant at Karen Mallory's home. What they found went beyond petty HOA tyranny and straight into conspiracy thriller territory. In a locked file cabinet in her guest bedroom, behind a fake Live, Laugh, Love canvas, the officers found a spiral notebook filled with names, addresses, home values, travel dates, and projected lien estimates. Each entry was color-coded, red for missed fees, yellow for unattended mail, and green for approved for action. My name was there, of course, Mark Green with a smug little check mark. Marcus Ridge's name was too. So was a couple that had moved to Florida to care for an aging parent. Karen had been running the HOA like it was a real estate hedge fund, except the assets were people's homes and the strategy was straight up theft. 3 other board members were arrested within the next 48 hours. The treasurer, a man named Vince Doherty, had been quietly moving HOA funds into what he labeled a maintenance reserve, but was really a private investment account tied to Safe Haven Realty. One of the compliance officers admitted that Karen had pressured him into fast-tracking violations with little to no documentation. The third, an elderly board member named Lorraine, simply said, "Karen told me it was standard policy. I thought liens were like parking tickets." She looked genuinely shocked to find out she'd been accessory to grand theft real estate. As the legal gears ground into motion, a quiet tragedy played out. The family who had unknowingly bought my house, Bethany, her husband, and their 2 kids, were informed by the court that the sale was void. Fraudulent transfer. They had 30 days to vacate. They cried when they packed. I don't blame them. They were victims too. Collateral damage in a fraud machine disguised as a neighborhood improvement committee. The HOA's insurance would cover some of their losses, but not all. Not the memories they'd started to build, not the embarrassment of explaining to their children why they had to leave their new bedrooms. I returned to my house on a rainy Tuesday morning. The door opened with a new key. The inside looked like a furniture showroom halfway through a clearance sale. Everything I owned had either been sold, tossed, or replaced. My bookshelves were gone. The rug I bought from a street market in Morocco, gone. In its place, a framed sign that read, "Family is where the Wi-Fi connects automatically." It felt like walking into someone else's pen. I stood in the middle of the living room, letting the silence settle over me like dust. This was still my house, but it wasn't my home yet. Not anymore. I wandered through each room like I was touring a memory I used to own. Every drawer I opened revealed unfamiliar items, someone else's silverware, someone else's towels, someone else's life. I found a thank you card in one of the kitchen cabinets. "Bethany, thank you for making this house feel like a home." I held it for a long time. I should have felt victorious. I'd won, technically. Karen was facing multiple felony charges. Her little HOA empire was collapsing and the neighborhood was waking up. But all I could think about was what it cost to get here and how much of me had been bulldozed in the process. Still, the war wasn't quite over, because even after the arrests, the court dates, and the media circus, Karen hadn't said a word. No apology, no statement, no defense, just silence, which, coming from her, felt less like surrender and more like strategy. Karen's silence didn't last long. 2 weeks after the arrests, the HOA announced a special town hall meeting to clarify recent misunderstandings and restore community cohesion. The flyer arrived in every mailbox, printed on heavy cardstock, naturally, and signed in actual pen by Karen herself. No apology, just a note that she'd explain everything. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday afternoon in the Clearbrook Glen Community Center, the same beige building where Karen once threatened to fine a resident for wearing flip-flops to a board vote. The room was packed, not just with neighbors, but with reporters, 2 sheriff's deputies standing by the door, and at least 3 teenagers live streaming the whole thing on TikTok with captions like, "Karen versus the people." Karen entered fashionably late, of course, dressed in a navy pantsuit, her signature pearl necklace in place, and a binder thick enough to be confused for a court transcript. She walked to the podium with the calm poise of someone who still believed she was the protagonist. "Let me begin by addressing the recent media distortions," she said, flipping open her binder. "The role of the HOA is to preserve order. Sometimes that means making unpopular decisions, but I assure you, that was as far as she got." The doors burst open. 2 officers stepped forward. One calmly said, "Karen Mallory, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit real estate fraud, grand theft, and multiple counts of forgery." There was a moment of absolute stillness, then gasps, then whispers, then the unmistakable sound of someone dropping a bag of popcorn in slow motion. Karen blinked, stunned. "Excuse me?" she asked, still gripping the podium like it could protect her from reality. "This is a mistake. I'm the president." "Not anymore," one officer replied as they clicked the cuffs around her wrists. It was poetic. And it was all caught on camera, 3 angles, perfect audio, and a dramatic slow zoom posted within minutes under the viral title, "HOA Karen Goes Down Like a Reality TV Villain." It hit 1.2 million views by nightfall. The fallout was immediate. Residents who had been too scared to speak suddenly found their voices. A petition to disband the existing HOA reached 300 signatures in less than 24 hours, more than half the neighborhood. A follow-up meeting was held without Karen or her clipboard brigade, and a temporary community committee was elected. No titles, no power plays, just volunteers with common sense and working Wi-Fi. Danielle was invited to help them draft bylaws for a new civilian-led association, one that couldn't sell your house if your mailbox looked depressed. Marcus Ridge, the Marine who lost everything, was elected community liaison. I watched him shake hands with neighbors like a man reclaiming a battlefield. He smiled for the first time in months. I returned home later that week and stood in my front yard, staring at the patchy lawn and the porch I hadn't had time to repaint. The wind was sharp. I was tired, but in a clean way, the kind of tired that comes from winning something you didn't ask to fight for. I pulled out a small wooden sign I'd carved myself over the weekend. Simple, clean letters burned into the surface. I hammered it into the dirt just beyond the driveway. Still standing, still mine. HOA not welcome. Some neighbors stopped to read it. Most nodded. One older man from 2 streets over gave me a quiet thumbs up. No one called code enforcement. No one emailed a complaint. For the first time in 6 years, it felt like a neighborhood again. Not a gated anxiety experiment run by someone with a power complex and too much access to printer ink. But even as the dust settled and Karen awaited her trial in an orange jumpsuit 3 counties over, a part of me knew this wasn't the last I'd hear of her. People like Karen don't just disappear. They wait, they rebrand, and sometimes they show up with a clipboard in a new neighborhood, claiming they're just here to help. They say power corrupts, but give someone a clipboard, a vague set of bylaws, and a Facebook group with admin privileges, and you'll witness a full-blown suburban dictatorship. This wasn't just about a house. It was about standing your ground when petty tyranny wears pearls and calls itself community leadership. Sometimes doing the right thing means becoming the annoying neighbor who asks too many questions, and sometimes it means reclaiming your porch, your peace, and your God-given right to hang Halloween lights whenever the hell you want. If you've ever dealt with a Karen in power or survived your own HOA horror story, drop it in the comments. Let's build a neighborhood that runs on common sense, not compliance codes. Like, share, and remember, just because someone says it's a rule doesn't mean it's the law.